My fiance and I, well, actually, my wife, we've just been married in the last 10 days. My wife and I were just talking this morning about luck and not luck. She was telling me she was so lucky because she's been watching Thai and Filipina K1 fiance visas, and the many stories that did not work out, including one Thai woman who was so broke by the time that he got back from what is a Thai tradition to show the honor and respect of the family by the degree of money paid by the bridegroom. And for better or for worse, this is the system in upper-class Thai families. And Peter Sandhill had recommended WIPA during my psychedelic session, and for months afterwards. I hadn't even mentioned her name before he'd asked if I was going to marry her. And so there's this unfolding absurdity, which, I'm always open to possible truths. I know that reality is multidimensional, and there was this one quality in WIPA that had stood out to me, which is why I was even in conversation with her, which was that she is arguably the best communicator I have ever met in my entire life in written communication, which was our initial communication. She read my book for Thai women. She fell in love with me by my book. Now, this is not a very auspicious beginning, in the sense that an award-winning American author had done the same thing. In fact, the award-winning American author had come to my house, been very poo-pooish, very standoffish, and insulted me by leaving our first date early. So I was not at all interested in her at this point. And, but I gave her a copy of one of my books. I think it was Co-Creating Conscious Chemistry. And she went home and read it and fell in love with me for the book. So, and it was not a good relationship, and I was quite suspicious of a woman who would be snooty around cuddling, snooty around spending time, play all kinds of superiority games with me, meaning my body, my mind, my heart, our presence, and then would fall in love with a book, which is a representation of a certain part of my cultured Western mind, with a particular talent, articulating talent. I think it's a little bit of I think it's cautionary if someone's more interested in a piece of writing than they are in your presence. That being as it may, WIPA was an exceptional communicator, and she told me later that she had spent 4 hours. She'd get home from her studying and her government job, and from about 9 p.m. until 1 a.m. would work and respond to every single sentence in my emails, which was nothing to be snooty about, because the typical person receives a 3-page letter from me and writes between 1 and 7 sentences. And here was she, doing literally 50 times more than average to communicate clearly. So anyway, this was this fragile basis of having this completely inappropriate person. Those that know me know that my biggest gripe in relationship has been people that don't spend quality time. Well, my love language is predicated on quality time, meaning 4 hours a day or more. The typical American wants to spend 10 hours a week in quality one-on-one time, meaning just go out on a date with 50 American women in the Bay Area and ask them how much they want to connect and leave that bit up to them, and it'll be about 10 hours, often less. That's an average. Well, my comfortable average is 300% more. It's 30 hours as an average. So here she is getting a PhD and working in a government job away from the ocean in Thailand. And then she's in this upper class family where holding hands in public is a worse than criminal offense. It dishonors the family's reputation, and the family's reputation is everything. So I knew within the first 10 minutes of talking with this woman on the phone that this was a disaster. And I took the time to say in the first 10 minutes, I love your communication. Thank you for being open to my book. And in our first 10-minute Skype conversation, I said, I want to be near the water, swimming, lots of quality time, traveling back and forth, to America, etc. And you're in school, a plane ride away from the ocean, in an untourist-friendly part of Thailand. Meaning nobody speaks English, no motorbikes to rent, nothing to be remotely, relevant to me having a nice experience there. And you're working full time. And you're not going to have sex before marriage. So anyway, this is a disaster. I said, let's just say goodbye. But I've never seen someone's face collapse the way her face collapsed. As I said goodbye, and she was snooty as well, I might add, but as I said goodbye, I've never seen someone's face collapse. And I thought about it, and I thought, she's a great communicator. Heaven knows why she isn't on the same page with this, because, when I see differences in relationship needs, I think of it as a great kindness to elucidate those differences as quickly as possible prior to emotional attachment and biological attachment forming. That cannot be fulfilled, that cannot be honored in the way that's going to honor who both people are. I see this as a great kindness, and I've always seen this as a great kindness, which is why I tear my hair out at all the women who are insulted by taking the time to actually ask the most important question: am I going to make you happy as I am? And are you going to make me happy as I am? Because it's the same question. If you are so self-centered and so narcissistic that you can be happy when I'm not happy, you don't even know what love is. If you do know what love is, you know you cannot be happy with your partner being miserable primarily because they're in relationship to you. And you know that, for example, if someone needs quality time as a primary love language and you don't have it, it's nothing wrong with you. There's something wrong with the context of the relationship. So the fact that we live in a culture that doesn't get this any more than it got it 2,000 years ago, I mean, it is laughable and a tragedy of stupidity. But it doesn't change the fact that you cannot truly be happy if you cannot bring happiness to your partner and vice versa. So, having pointed out all the ways that she would not make me happy, it's puzzling. Why did her face drop like this? Well, it turned out she'd fallen in love with me and created a sense of me from the book. Now, this is a very interesting thing about love because, and it relates to the kind of love that is called joy in the presence. You can have joy in the presence of someone who is completely inappropriate, logistically and preferentially, to build the other kinds of love. Now, you can have joy in a fantasy as well, which has nothing to do with reality. But someone's presence is their feminine essence. And you can love someone's feminine essence and love them enough to say, you know, I love your presence and I would ruin it. You know, because presence requires a certain algorithm, a certain environment in which to be itself. You see, the presence that can emerge for an artist in silence and stillness cannot emerge in a 9-to-5 job. It's a different energy. Presence is always shrinking, being clipped, or being given room to expand. And when you truly love someone's presence, you want to see that blossom in the world, in the way. I mean, if you love a rose, don't stick the damn thing in the shade. Give it water, give it nitrogen, give it mulch, and give it sunlight, and enough breeze that it doesn't develop mildew. I mean, give it the space to be magnificent. And I just told this woman that the spaces she had would make me absolutely miserable. And she was crestfallen. So I thought, well, why don't I just give her something? She's fallen in love with a book. She's fallen in love with this idea. She doesn't have time for anything that I would call a relationship. So I decided I'd give her a call back, and I would say this. I'd say, you know, we're not appropriate for relating, which hopefully you gathered from all that, but we don't need to say goodbye. Because I'd said I think we should say goodbye. That's when her face should collapse. This was our first Skype call, and took all of 10 minutes to see we were completely inappropriate for each other. So I called her back and I said, how about this? you write to me anytime you want, and I will reply, and we'll be pen pals. And she lit up. And so I thought, great, I can make this woman happy, and it won't take me a lot of time. I love it. Men love to see the feminine happy. It's beautiful to see radiance. And so anyway, there she was happy. So this was the woman that, as soon as I mentioned her name, Peter Sandhill, said, "Are you going to marry her?" And I'm like, what? I've come close to marrying 4 women, and every one of them are 10 times more appropriate than this. And this woman is a virgin, by the way. So anyway, I was explaining to my wife, she said she felt very lucky because she was hearing about all the various nightmares that happen. This person came on a K-1 visa and was sent home. This person was broke. And I was explaining why one of the people were broke, because I got to this point where Peter kept telling me that the most luminous future that I could possibly have was with this Thai woman, Weepa. And I didn't know it at the time, and Peter probably didn't know it either. But I was in a mode of figuring out who... I was figuring out how to play the coping strategy that kept me alive with narcissistic parents, which was to make them feel great and important, which they weren't. They were not great and important, but you have to make a narcissistic support person feel great. And so the only thing that made Peter feel great at this time was pretending that he was a great psychic. And how do you honor someone's, supposed gift? You respond to it. You let it change your life. And so Peter was blocking me in all the areas he felt incompetent, but he, for some reason, thought he was a great psychic. And so giving him that kept him in what turned out to be abuse, but what I hoped would be support, which one very much needs in a psychedelic follow-up session. So, and so this is what's happened. The volatility around Peter, the volatility around another Thai woman who betrayed me within the same week, all left Weepa as the only support person. So Peter Sandhill abused and betrayed me, and this other woman betrayed me, who I was quite interested in at the time. And the only one left was Weepa. And in a psychedelic experience, is incredibly tumultuous. And particularly for someone with trauma and childhood abuse, when all this is stirring up, secure belonging, love, belonging, and secure attachment is very much there. Now, Weepa stepped up to the plate here when Peter fucked up and when the other woman didn't catch me. I basically said, I really need presence, I need container, I need your time right now. And the other woman decided to take a road trip with her friends and didn't call when she said she would and lied about it. And it's like, I have no container and no trust here. It's a long distance. I have no one. And there's this one woman, Weepa, who's staying up late to show up for me. And I get that she is the only resource in humanity at this point who is putting my feelings first. Well, this is a deep need, particularly when your therapist is not showing up. So, and what she needs is she has this version of true love in which there's sacrifice. It's all about sacrifice. She's spent some time in Japan, and later in the relationship, she criticized me. She said, the Japanese, they would die for love, not you, but, if you were like the Japanese, you'd kill yourself on your sword, So she had this, she was a virgin. She was 35 years old, but she'd never fallen in love. From childhood trauma, she dissociated, but she had been used a lot by her father in particular. And she had this, she couldn't feel love, but she had a vivid inner world, and she could sacrifice. And so she did. I mean, she'd have these elaborate sacrificial rituals for her father so that her father could lay about. She would drive without any air conditioning to save 50 cents and give it to her father. That kind of sacrificial, I will show how much I love you because I can't feel love. This is what happens with trauma and childhood abuse. I can't feel it, so I will show you how much I love by how much I will suffer for you. And this was what it's all about for her. And so the fact that I had these needs, and she loved watching romantic movies about, I think one of it was, Beautiful Mind or something, Anyway, she had this fantasy that there'd be this totally dependent, sick person who she would love totally, meaning she would devote her entire life to sacrificing her life for him. And I hated this idea because one of the things, women are incredibly impactful in what makes them happy, meaning there's a part of me that is always looking, what do I have to be and do to make you totally happy? Now, with this woman, Weepa, I had to be a dependent, helpless imbecile, and she would then get to play out her version of total sacrificial love, and she would be very happy. But what a role to play. It's like, okay, so I've made you happy by being completely dependent, completely poor and useless and all that. So it's like, I was sick of this. And this was her pain reward system as well, meaning when I was strong, confident, and happy, she was not as happy. When Peter would fuck me over, or I was miserable and hurt and lonely, there was nothing she liked more than staying up all night or sacrificing this or that or the other to make me happy. Now, when one is sick, so I had this dual thing. It's like, I really do need help now because I've got such an incompetent therapist, and neither of us can admit it because he's too narcissistic to face his incompetence. And I need someone navigate. I mean, I had told him I needed 9 months to integrate what was the most profound experience of my life. Well, he started off blocking it in the first session. No, we can't talk about this. No, I don't have any blind spots. No, I'm not going to tell you this. I mean, this was going to obviously be quite a delicate thing to get 9 months of integration out of this person. And so what can I throw him? So there's the part of me trying to please Peter, and then there's the part of me trying to please Weepa. And both of these people want me sick because Peter cannot possibly pretend that his incompetence is heroic and helping me unless I play the role of a complete mess. Weepa cannot feel that she's involving her total, complete love unless I'm, a pity case. But I don't want to be a pity case. This went on with my parents, by the way, with all of the children in the same dynamic, where my parents were incompetent, traumatized, narcissistic parents who were massively fucked up by our culture, frankly. I mean, it's just what our culture does to a percentage of its people. And they needed fucked up kids who would make them feel important. That's what they needed. And so I was in this dance with my parents, where on the one hand I was disgusted and had it. And on the other hand, I would play this weird, ugly role that would let them feel safe enough to emotionally connect with their self-pity at being martyred parents, basically. And it was a very sick dynamic, because when the parents were not there, I would babysit my siblings, and we could be human beings, and we have honor and have dignity and be happy and be quiet, and there were no problems. But we all knew what we had to do once my parents returned, which was we had to play the role that they were in. I mean, they invented this role for themselves as these martyred, overburdened, perfect parents who had all these horrible children. Well, they weren't perfect parents. They didn't know what they were doing. They were highly abused and mentally and emotionally ill. And so how do they possibly get to pull off how wonderful they are if we're normal kids, who don't need their stupidity? And, so we had to play these roles, and my parents would bribe us for playing sick roles, basically. They'd give lots of attention and doting on the sick role, and they would ignore and punish the healthy role. You try and be honest with my parents about how you feel, you get punished. You try and be honest about how they could change, you get punished. You try and talk about what it's actually like to be their child, you get punished. But if you play a sick role and they get to be the hero in some way, they reward you right and left. And they love it. And kids want to make their parents happy. So the same was going on with Peter Sandhill. You try and point out some of his mistakes, wouldn't hear of it. Try and deal stuff direct, he runs away. Play a sick role and let him be the hero, and he gets to show up, and he likes that role. So that's the only role he's willing to play. So I have to, since he's incompetent, I have to play dumb roles. You see, and the trouble is, when you've got parents that call all that love, and then you've got therapists that call all that love, like, where's the gap? Where does the individual get to really wake up to this dynamic and say, well, this is a nightmare? And then Peter said that the most luminous future for me in my entire life is marrying Weepa. Offering me a way to honor him in a certain way, to at least honor his delusions of grandeur. And so I'm going along with this role, but it's and I'm hooked, because I don't have any other place to turn. Now, Maslow talks about love and belonging being level 3 in our human needs. Survival, security, love, and belonging. It's a basic core human need, love and belonging. I don't have that. I mean, there's many, many reasons, from not being able to bond with either parent emotionally, from, the stupidity of our high school abuse system that we call education. There's many, 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 many reasons why I don't have a secure, healthy emotional attachment. I mean, whether it's the stereotypes of men, and how many women have told me that men don't even have feelings, let alone their inability to listen to mine. I mean, it's a nightmare for us, it's a nightmare for men in this culture to know what the fuck hit them before they've been raped, discarded, and traumatized in their feminine self to such a level that they're numb. Just completely out of it. It takes that amount of abuse to do that to men, and we give it to them. So here we are, and Weepa needs me to now be this decrepit, helpless person. And the more I am, the more she loves me. So she's got that reward system going on, meaning the more she dotes on me. She gives me my needs if I will be pathetic, basically. I'm angry about this, just as I was angry with my parents, just because I'm angry with Peter. I do not want to have to be pathetic and helpless in order to be loved. I want to be loved in my dignity. Now, I can feel, because I've watched myself change around, at that point, at least 80 lovers. I've watched myself change around different women. So I know that there's this chemistry that goes on where the part of me that wants to please a woman becomes more like the person she feels pleased by. And I don't want to have to become more helpless in my already terrified and helpless state from all that happened with Peter Sandhill just to please Weepa, but that's what she needs. So anyway, my wife is talking about how lucky we are. And yes, we are very, very lucky, but it's also not luck. And this is how I eventually broke. Peter Sandhill never, ever acknowledged that his insistence that I marry Weepa, or that this was for my great interest, and that he never, ever acknowledged to this day that this was a crock of shit and just fantasy on Peter Sandhill that I paid a very high price to humor. But here were the things that I typically pay attention to in relationship, and which slowly got me out of relationship with Weepa and Peter, meaning Peter stopped having anything to do with me as soon as he couldn't play the hero with Weepa. So I was correct on that intuition, that sense that I had to make him look great, or he wasn't interested. He was always too busy to actually show up for me, and could show up to be praised, basically, to be paid to look great. But Weepa was the only woman in my entire life who had her wiring so backwards, meaning when I'd say, please hold me, she would refuse. So we'd just done that. Please, she just lied to me. I'd had it and wanted nothing to do with her. Then she said she apologized and wanted to be close, of course, because I want nothing to do with her. Then when I said, please hold me, she argued and refused. And I said, fine, I've had it. I will take care of myself. So she immediately followed me. I said, get the fuck out of here. No. She gets closer, of course. This is what rewired people do. And it's not their fault. These are trauma survivors that are going through life being traumatized without a single member of their family, culture, or therapeutic or support team who cares enough about them and the culture to address the trauma. Kids cannot do this on their own. We need help for trauma. So she's a trauma survivor. We get to the hotel room, and I'm determined to lock her out because I have had it. And she will not leave me. I can't stand this. I feel completely violated in every way. I open the room and I try and get in, but she darts in, and then she won't leave the hotel room. I say I will call security. And then she lays into me. She says, so you want me to leave, do you? I said, I've only asked you, 5 times in the last 2 minutes? I've never had this kind of interaction with a single adult woman. But this is the person Peter Sandhill wants me to marry. And she says, she turns it all into, of course, that it's my fault. And she says, I will never talk to you again if I leave this room. This triggers abandonment issues. It's like there's no winning with her. It's like, I want you to leave so that I can recover, so that I can pursue this crazy idea of Peter Sandhill's of marrying you, which I need time to recover from your latest rounds of abuse. And now you're saying that if I have the time I need to recover so that we still have a chance, you're never going to talk to me again, which is the deep abandonment wound. And I lose it. So I open the door and I shove her out. And I lock the door. Well, now that I shove her out, she's completely interested again. Well, this is just terrifying and confusing for a trauma survivor. So I don't know what's going on, and I don't know why the fuck Peter wants me to marry. And I keep telling him all this stuff. And he's like, well, all I can say is this is the most luminous future. If you ever want a luminous future, just contact Peter Sandhill. And it's like, Peter, she's in school. She has a government job. She's a virgin. She's the only violent woman like this in my relationship history. She's cross-wired. Da, da, da. All I can say, the most luminous. Well, we have a conversation with her parents, who, by the way, this is the only woman, courtesy of Peter Sandhill, who wants me to pay her parents $30,000 in this Thai ritual of sinsad. So this is coming back to why this American is broke. And then the Thai woman who comes to America and he has no car and nothing, she's all feels self-pity and furious, just like Weepa would, no doubt. But I remember sitting in Weepa's family and I said, look, your daughter is so argumentative. She's going to need to stay in a hotel at times. See, this is me. This is the lengths to which a coping strategy around trauma will go. This is the lengths to which a coping strategy around trauma will go to make it work when that's what they need to feel safe, love, and belonging. So I'm trying to get that from my therapist, and I'm trying to get that from this woman, and I have it from no one else, and hadn't begun to get it from my parents. And this makes no sense to me, because I just learned that I had to pay $30,000 to marry this woman. This is the honorary dowry to the father, to repay him for the hard work of raising my wife for me, right? So, and the higher the salary, the higher the dowry, it's called sinsad. The higher the dowry, the more honor the family has in the community. And it's all about, in the upper class families, it's all about honor in the community. So I'm looking at it and it's like, I don't have any money right now. But I could borrow the money. I have a line of credit. I have no debt. I don't want to go into debt. But I could borrow $30,000 to pay this family. I said, there's just one problem. Weepa, being one of the most stubborn, ornery, violent, and cross-wired people that I've encountered, who is the bride-to-be, according to Peter Sandhill, is going to need her own car, is going to need $20,000 a year for either an apartment or a hotel room anytime I can't deal with it and she won't leave the house, or she will leave the house and I need to put her up in a hotel. So I work out that it's going to cost $90,000 for her immigration, for the wedding, because of course it has to be all this expensive wedding. This is the bizarre joke. I want to go slow, but her parents will have none of it. I say, why don't we take Weepa to the U.S. for a week and see if she actually likes it there. Maybe things will get better, maybe they will get worse. They say, no. We can never let her leave Thailand until she's married. I said, okay, fine, let's get married. Let's please Peter. He'll be happy with that. Weepa will be happy with that. Fine, it's just a marriage. You understand, people, that I'm not going to spend time with your daughter unless she's happy. I don't know if she's going to be happy until she arrives in my house. She doesn't know if she's never been out of the country. She may get homesick and want to return in a month or 2 months. And if she does, I'm going to put her on a plane and send her back. And so that's the way it is. And they said, oh, we can't do that until she gets married. I said, oh, fine, we'll get married. And I said, so then if she's unhappy, we just get a divorce? They say, yes, we'll just get a divorce. I said, okay, well, a bit backwards from my perspective, but the most luminous future in my life, got to give it some breathing room, right? So then I said, well, then they say, well, where's the $30,000? And I said, what $30,000? I said, oh, well, of course, you've got to pay us $30,000. I said, what do you mean, of course? I've dated plenty of Thai women. In fact, the first Thai woman I dated was a way better match, was a university professor. I didn't connect with her because she was locked in as a university professor, a plane flight away from the ocean, in a horribly unfriendly city for tourists where no one spoke English, blah, 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 blah. And she couldn't leave her university job because they lock Thai professors in Thailand with a $100,000 penalty if they don't finish their term, which I would have had to pay. You think $30,000 is a lot for a dowry? Well, I would have had to pay $100,000 for this Thai professor to quit her job 4 years early, $25,000 a year for the penalty. And she doesn't get $25,000 a year. Or if she does, it's basically, if you leave early, you've got to pay your own, you don't get your salary, and then you got to pay your salary. And she didn't have money and she didn't want to sell her house and her family. Anyway, so that was the end of that relationship because for various reasons. But anyway, this is much worse. She didn't want me to pay her dowry, and she invited me to get married and just live with her in her nice house. I just couldn't stand being made to fit into all these things that had nothing to do with me, and it just didn't work. So, but anyway, here's Weepa's family. They want me to pay. I said, well, let's do the books here. Weepa's going to need her own car. Well, $20,000 for that. She has nothing, right? I've got to give her a phone. I've got to give her food. I've got to let her fly back and forth to visit you guys. She's no doubt going to be homesick. Then I've got to have about $20,000 in savings for hotel, an apartment, should that be necessary, because there's a very good chance in the fact that we can't even spend 10, 24 hours together as it is, and this is the honeymoon stage. I mean, this is going to require money and stuff. And I said, then there's a good, we're going to need at least $10,000 in therapy a year, because this is a joke. Peter Sandhill, having recommended this woman, comes online as our mediator. And so I pay him $175 an hour every day almost to resolve the conflicts that come up from inevitably being with a completely inappropriate partner. It's great job security for Peter Sandhill. I don't know how he manages to pull off that this is the greatest vision and future for my destiny and all that, but he pulls that off nicely. And so we have to pay Peter Sandhill. Well, that's $175 a day at least. So I work up, it's a $90,000 bill for our first year in relationship. I said, I don't have it. And I'm trying to explain this to these Thai family that are so important, the family honor and all this. I said, you do realize that I don't have any money right at the moment. That's what suicide and trauma and da-da-da-da-da, generally adds up. It's kind of hard to be at your best work-wise. And I said, I don't have any money at the moment. I'm going to have to borrow my full line of credit of $30,000 to pay you. I said, so where's the money for Weepa's car? Where's the money for the hotel? Where's the money for this therapy that I'm paying $175 a day for? Then Weepa wants me, and I have this conversation with Weepa in my dingy hotel in her town where I'm left laying there all day because there's nothing to do, and she has to go off to work, and she can't spend the night with me because that would ruin Thai custom, right? This is the worst period I've ever spent in Thailand, and it is the most expensive period I've ever spent in Thailand, courtesy of Peter Sandhill, and my desire to please these two people who had their different agendas that had nothing to do with my well-being. And that's the sadness. The sadness is when one needs love and belonging enough that one contorts oneself into this amount of loneliness. And it's like, what do I have to do to feel secure in a single attached relationship? Because we all need that. Abraham Maslow's done a beautiful job of articulating this as a human need. You need it, I need it. Americans deny the need. It doesn't change that it's there. It just creates a lot of pain and addiction when it's not met. You need it, I need it. What do I have to do to meet this need in this fucked up of a culture? Well, Weepa is meeting, believe it or not, my sense of belonging more than any American, period, including Peter Sandhill. The Thais have an emotionality in a certain way, a passion in a certain way that is, it gives a sense of significance. And I needed that, particularly dealing with the trauma that had been pulled up from childhood, from the psychedelic session that Peter Sandhill had pushed hard to escalate. Now, he escalated the dose, which escalated the emotional fallout, which escalated the need, which left me in a very precarious point in my psychology and in my life. Now, I sat with Weepa going over this long bill. And after trying, I asked her parents if they would take a payment plan, basically, for this marriage dowry. $5,000 now, $5,000 in 3 months, so that we'd have some working capital to actually take care of her daughter. Now, family honor, this is how you know a sociopathic culture. It tends to be the upper echelons of most cultures that are the most sociopathic, because the culture is often the most sociopathic element of the country. You take ordinary peasants, I'll use that word just as a generic, lower, and they're always more friendly, more generous, less political and stuff than these upper class, 3-degree, blah, 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 blah people. Because to climb a culture, particularly a modern culture, you shunt your consciousness further and further into the left lineal brain, which is the most sociopathic arena in the human psyche. It is an artifice of modern consciousness and Western civilization to shunt ourselves so out of the feminine, so out of emotion, so out of empathy and rapport into these long lists of lineal logic where you'll have math wizards like Stephen Hawking, who it's hard to know if they ever feel anything, elevated, and it's even better that he's half machine, right? Anyway. This is the person that a culture thinks is the pinnacle of life, and you have this vivacious dancer in their feminine beauty, and the culture says, oh, that's just child's play, and throws it out because we're too dumb to honor our own feminine presence. So we don't, and we suffer. And you can generally tell how sophisticated someone is in a culture by how miserable they are, and how detached from their emotions they are, and how addicted they are, and how long and arduous and tortuous the routine is between sleeping, eating, and fucking, core animal needs. A highly sophisticated cultural person will have about 2,000 steps that have to happen to eat in the right way, sleep in the right way, in the right place, have sex in the right place with the right person. Whereas normal, healthy people just eat, sleep, and connect with the people around them without making such a big fuss. Think monkeys. Now, I'm sitting there with Weepa, and I'm saying, this doesn't make any sense. I'm not asking you to... And she says it's all about money. I said, who is not going to get married if I don't pay? You're the prostitute. You're all about money. I'm not asking you to pay for a goddamn thing. I'm not asking you to buy me a car. But she has this one little... And then she wants me to... Anyway, she wants me to pay some of the mortgage of the house that she would leave to come and live with me in the U.S. So she wants me to pay some of the mortgage because she says it wouldn't be fair on my parents that we built this house thinking I would live here. Now I'm moving, and I've been paying, X amount per month of my salary into this house, and now I'm not living there, but I should still pay the salary. So you have to pay the salary. So you pay the mortgage for my house. And I say, well, you've got your car. How much is that worth? She says, $8,000. Okay. I said, so how do you feel about your one contribution to this $90,000 bill being selling your $8,000 car and contributing it? And she said, oh, I couldn't do that. I said, what's it going to do? She says, it will sit in the driveway at my house. I said, which you're not there. She said, yes. I said, so why exactly can't you sell your car to contribute something of this $90,000 bill of money that I don't have, but that you want me to have so that I can marry you, which I don't want to get married. This is just so you can get married so that you have a chance to come to the U.S. on my dime and see if you like the United States enough to want to stay and not get a divorce in 3 months. She said, my parents are going to miss me a lot. I said, yes. Who wouldn't miss someone slaving and turning off their air conditioner to make 50 cents extra a day to give it all to the father? Who wouldn't miss that? Anyway, but none of this is going to me, and she says, so they're going to miss me. I said, yes. She said, I want to leave my car in the driveway. Now, what will happen is when they leave the house every morning, they will see my car and they will remember that it's my car, and they won't miss me as much. And I don't know if you can get a sense of how invisible I feel. Pay $90,000 that you don't have. Tell your therapist again. So I tell Peter Sandhill all these different reasons why this seems terrible. I say, Peter, I've asked him multiple times, Peter, are you sure this is the very best relationship you can possibly think of for me? I say, well, forget your psychic powers. I try a workaround. Can I get Peter Sandhill to actually take an interest in my well-being? This is the big question. Over himself. And I say, what if you were just my best friend? If you were my best friend, is this what I'm describing to you in this relationship? Is this what you'd want for your best friend? He said, oh, it's tough. It's tough. All I can say is this is the most luminous future for you. It's like, looks absolutely terrible from this vantage point. $90,000 bill, out in the middle of nowhere, violent, self-centered woman. And then she can't stand anything about me. She falls in love with my book, can't stand anything about me. I said, Weepa, is there anything in my book that is not me? Did I miss something? Is there anything at all that's new for you about this? I said, I like swimming by the ocean. I like swimming by the ocean. I said I wasn't interested in getting married. I said I'm not interested in having children. She would not use contraceptives. Well, anyway, the whole thing is mind-bogglingly overwhelming, exactly what you don't need when you're trying to process the trauma from an overdose in psychedelics with an incompetent therapist. These type and when I asked for the payment plan with her parents, Weepa stormed out of the room. And rather than apologizing or understanding just exactly how absurd this was, that she insisted on marrying me, other than Peter Sandhill, that's, I want a good relationship. That's all I want. It's just a piece of paper. If you have a good relationship with someone you have a bit of paperwork, it's great. If you have a bad relationship with someone you have a bit of paperwork, it's terrible. The paper doesn't change anything. I've never wanted to get married. I've wanted to have good relationships. So she lets me have it while we're driving to a dinner that I don't want to go to, that we have to go to for this long, elaborate Thai reason. And so I have to come for this long, elaborate Thai reason to celebrate our marriage, which I'm not particularly interested in. And she lets me have it about how I embarrassed her by asking for a payment plan. And it's like, I don't think you understand that if I spend all this money going into debt to pay your father, we are not going to succeed as a couple, because I can barely succeed with you while I have money to solve every problem that your inexperience, I was her first lover, brings up. Well, she couldn't possibly. So it's series like this that helped me see that the best and most luminous possible future for me was something I could do without. Whereas my wife, it's night and day. Night and day. And as the facilitators came on board in the abuse cycle initiated by Peter Sandhill, as that deteriorated to a point where I could no longer hold it in the framework of I'm being so loved by my facilitator and my therapist, as the abuse escalated, but with the board and the facilitators in their silence, in their denials, in their disowning, making it worse, further deteriorating the need to feel loved and belong by disconnecting me, blaming me, refusing to see, refusing to come into my world and understand what it's like to be me, the person that the whole organization is designed to serve. The Human Awareness Institute exists to help people, to support the participant. If there's no participant, there's no Human Awareness Institute. If the Human Awareness Institute abuses its participants, there's no Human Awareness Institute unless it is a psychopathology of mutual and consensual abuse, which unfortunately too much of healing is in our culture because we don't know enough to know what we don't know, which makes us very vulnerable for repeated childhood abuses and having it called various healthy things, whether it's going to the physical doctor and being given antidepressants that don't deal with the issue but just suppress the symptoms for a while and then you become addictive, or whether it's going to therapy to have things made worse with someone who says that they love you. We don't know enough to know what we don't know, because well-being and presence is a feminine quality. And in a chauvinistic and traumatized culture as such as our own, we would rather spend $1 billion developing a slightly faster microchip than we would rather spend $1 million developing better human software. This is our chauvinism, this is our curse, this is our stupidity. But it's not luck that my sweetheart and I ended up here. I watched her make a pattern of responses completely different to both Peter Sandhill and Weepa, and the other Thai woman who, left me in the lurch and then lied about it. It's a very, very different relationship, and so my well-being is coasting and moving along. That core need to feel loved and belong is being met. We're not lucky, but it is unusual. It is unusual in a highly traumatized modern world that is as chauvinistic as it is. It is unusual to find two people who will put the relationship as number one, as we both have, who will spend 24/7 building the relationship, as we have, who will put each other's deep feelings and femininity first, as we have, who understand that when we sacrifice, we make sacred a third energy that is bigger than either one of us, and we are intelligent in the sacrificing, in the things that we change and give up personally to blossom the relationship, which is more potent and powerful and more potentiated than either one of us as solitary individuals. We haven't needed to be rescued with Peter Sandhill. In fact, it's one of the first times I'm not seeing any therapy. I've just gotten too tired of therapists, energy healers, psychics, I've gotten too tired of the lack of accountability, of the lack of expertise, of the lack of understanding what real love is, of the lack of sophistication in asking the questions that make the difference. I've gotten too tired of that. And so all the $10,000 to $25,000 a year that I've been spending on that is being actually focused on investing in our future. And we are succeeding beautifully. In that wonderful of all tests, I knew the day that I met Jen that I was meeting a woman in the worst state that I had ever met a woman, which I think is wonderful. I've always said, if you're going to take a ship across the Atlantic, don't test it in calm waters. Test it in a hurricane. If it can survive the hurricane in a bay, it can survive the hurricane out in the water. But if you meet in calm, perfect conditions, it doesn't mean that when the next storm comes along, you won't capsize. So I knew that when I met Jen in troubled waters that were deeper and more uncertain than any waters I'd ever been in when I met someone, I knew that if we could make it through that water, the relationship would be sound in any other water, which is bound to be calmer, bound to be more sustainable. And I met Jen in troubled water. And I knew that if I could make it through the disease caused by her abuses of her day-to-day environment, and she was as nice a person as she was in the midst of that disease, that as we removed that environmental influence that brought out the worst in her, that she would grow. And this proved to be correct. So it is lucky, and she feels lucky that she is not arriving to a broke American with no car who lied about this or all this stuff. But it's not luck at all. I spotted Jen from among thousands for unusual traits, to show courage and openness to vulnerably connect in the feminine and honor it. And I'd been looking for those traits for a long time. And now I have them abundantly in my life. I feel incredibly grateful, incredibly happy. And I'm going to go spend some time with her.